Hi, everybody. Welcome. We're glad you're here. Please, if you're joining us, put in the comments your name, where you're joining us from, how you're doing today. Thank you so much, Aparna, for making time for this conversation. How are you doing today?
Thank you for inviting me. I feel like every day is a balance between being hopeful and optimistic about a future that is less violent, and then just also being really worried about the state of the world and, like waking up and feeling a little bit nauseous. But this morning I woke up and saw Prince Andrew was arrested, and yeah, actually helped me feel really good about life and that there is some semblance of justice. So that's kind of how I'm feeling.
I felt the same. That was such a big development to see him arrested. And at the same time, feeling like, why are all these folks in Europe bearing a consequence? But the people in the United States, okay, yes, some people are resigning, like Larry Summers is resigning, or the general counsel at Goldman Sachs is resigning, or
Yeah.
the head of Wasserman or whatever is resigning, but no
Yeah.
one is going to jail. Not to mention, I think it was Greg O'Lear who posted on Substack today that Trump is mentioned in the Epstein files a million times. And he said it's the equivalent of like all these books, like War and Peace, Anna Karenina, like all these like really long books. That is a million words if you had all those books combined.
Yeah.
It is mind-boggling. And I would also add, it's Black History Month, and it began with Donald Trump tweeting that horrific racist video about the Obamas. That feels like it was 10 years ago. It was like last week. And then
Yeah.
Jesse Jackson passed away, and just really reflecting on how Jesse Jackson fought for everybody, the Rainbow Coalition, including women, including white women.
Yeah. I feel like right now we're in a moment where every day feels like a year. Just there's so much happening, and I think, yes, it is February, it is still Black History Month, and yeah, I'm excited to have a conversation about like where we are, how we got here, how do we move forward, what's possible, all of
Wow.
it.
Aaron Parnas said it's more times than Harry's name appears in all of the Harry Potter books combined. Hmm. Well, I am grateful to you, Aparna, for all the work you do to bring truth and justice and community and intercultural, interracial understanding. And I just love for you to introduce yourself and share a little bit about you and the work that you do.
Yeah, thank you for that. My name is Aparna Ray, and I have worn so many different hats over the years. I've been an entrepreneur for over a decade. I've started 3 different companies. I've sold many of them. And I think what I take pride in this moment in my life is being a community builder and connector. And those are the identities that really resonate with me. Of course, I mean, I do worky work. And like a lot of people who are probably listening in, I'm writing the memos and making the decks and doing the strategy work. But I think that in the last 2 years, the work that I do that I'm the most proud of is actually organizing.
Yes. Yes. And I remember, I think the first time I met you was in Seattle at that wonderful women's co-working space.
Oh my gosh, that was a lifetime ago. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yes.
when you had this fantastic panel. Minda Harts was on the panel. of
Mhm.
women of color in the workplace, and it was just this very diverse audience, and it was just a great event. And I was like, "Who is this person? I must meet this person."
Yeah. Yep. Yeah,
And
that
also,
was a very long time ago. My gosh, that must have been in 2018, 2018, 2019. Yeah.
something like that. And also, you are a Forbes contributor. You have written so many fantastic articles. Everybody, make sure you're following Aparna and reading what she writes about. And oh, The Riveter. Yes, thank you, Julie. That's what it's called. My memory has gotten so bad, y'all. It is really frightening. Like, it is not good. But Nish says, can relate to swinging between feelings of rage and hope. Yes, exactly, Nish. It's like, what? How can this possibly be happening? But at the same time, it's like everybody's, I mean, this has been happening since 1619, right? And now it's like the veil is removed and everybody is seeing it at the same time. My minister at church was talking about there's some word for that, some biblical word when like the truth is revealed to everybody at the same time, and it is so powerful for everybody. Oh wow, other people were there at the Riveter that night.
Yeah.
It's so cool.
I
Lisa.
remember that night. Yeah, I remember when Minda Harts was there. I in fact remember what I was wearing, which is so rare. Yeah, it was with my last startup, Future for Us. 2
Yeah.
startups ago. Yeah.
And Lisa says Karen Fleshman are the Karens we need. Thank you, Lisa. And tune in. Okay, we will share the link. Lisa runs a wonderful organization called Lisa's Living Room. That's an organization largely of Black women. And she approached me about having a conversation about the Netflix documentary, The Perfect Neighbor. And Aparna has kindly agreed to moderate that conversation. So that's going to be on March 3rd. That will be on Zoom. So we'll share out the registration link with people to join us on March 3rd for that for that meeting. Yes. Excellent. I met Minda at that panel. Yes. Wow. Wow, 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 wow. Okay, so I am Karen Fleshman. I am the founder of the Interracial Sisterhood Coalition. We are uniting women across difference to secure our collective safety and freedom. And, I am so angry, like so beyond angry. The United States was already the most dangerous country for women among all the developed countries. Before the Dobbs decision, we had the highest maternal mortality rate. And of course, it is 3 to 4 times higher for Black women. Since Dobbs and all the states that have restricted abortion and reproductive care. Now we have reproductive care deserts where OBGYNs don't even want to practice in these places anymore. And it's doubling the maternal mortality rate. And so many other areas as well. The SAVE Act trying to take away women's voting rights, just 600,000 Black women pushed out of the labor force in 2015, 2025. This is Count
Yeah.
Boy research, and I just feel like women, we must unite across difference. And I actually met Nish, who's on this when Minda Harts and Deepa, I can't think of her last name.
Purushottam.
Yes,
Yeah.
had a call. This was in December, and it was for women of color who've been impacted by the by layoffs. and allies. It was a call for us to come together, and I was the only white woman on that call. I'm like, "White women, hello. We need to step up and be sisters and be in solidarity with our sisters."
Yeah.
Oh, and Lisa is sharing the Zoom information for our event on March 3rd. So, what we are talking about today, we are here to talk about what we as non-Black women owe Black people uh, this Black History Month and beyond. And it's always so interesting to me, Black History Month, because there's so many fabulous events and celebrations and people posting all of this excellent Black history that I just learned so much during this month. But I don't see a lot of conversations about accountability or things that need to change. And that's what I really wanted to talk with you about today, Aparna.
Yeah, well, and I would just say that, like since we're reminiscing about that one wonderful night at the Riveter with Minda Harts and so many other incredible and especially women of color. In the last couple of years, I've noticed a real discernible drop in people talking about Black history during Black History Month. It used to be that even 5 years ago in February, like our calendars were really full with events and conversations and webinars and ERGs and just even if it was really only happening at the level of like increasing people's awareness, there was a lot happening. And I think in the last year or two, I've seen just such a discernible drop in engagement. And I've seen almost nothing, for instance, on my social media, like the platforms that I'm on, which is primarily Instagram and LinkedIn. I've seen so little this year, and it just really breaks my heart because in this moment, we at least need to ground in awareness if we are going to be able to take action in solidarity with each other to fight the rise of fascism, not only in this country but like really everywhere.
Yes, I agree with you 100%. And I see LaRon Barton, my dear friend, has joined us. Thank you so much for joining us, LaRon. We'd love to hear your three things. Um, so, you know, I was a moderate Democratic club here in San Francisco, the Alice B. Toklas Club, asked me to come in and facilitate a conversation earlier this month because they were having a leadership retreat. And some leaders of the club, namely Black and Brown leaders of the club, wanted them to add in the Black, Brown, and trans stripes into the club logo. And some leaders of the club, namely white people, were resistant to that. And so they have me come in and facilitate a conversation. And I don't like to talk to people. I like to pose questions and have them answer it back and forth. And so we did some rounds about what did you learn from your parents about race and racism growing up and things of that nature. And then I posed to them the question, what do LGBTQ Americans owe Black Americans? And some members of the club had a real struggle to answer that question. They didn't really even understand the question. And then a Black lesbian stood up and said, every fucking thing. Like, do you think that you would have marriage equality? Do you think
Mhm.
that gay parents would be able to adopt kids? Do you think you would have protection from employment discrimination. Do you think you would have all of these things if it weren't
Mhm.
for? And to me, that was so powerful because I feel that same way as a white woman. You know, would I have protection from sexual harassment or other forms of employment discrimination? Would I have access to Title IX benefits in the university setting? Would I have all of these things if it weren't for Black people? No.
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, and I suppose, like, we need to answer that with respect to the relationship that white and Asian women have with Black folks, right? Like, if the same question gets asked, "What do you owe?" Like, "What do you owe?" Are we ready to answer that question?
Because there were a handful of white women who did participate in the civil rights movement. I was just seeing this morning this beautiful statue of Viola Liuso, who was killed in 1965 when she went to Montgomery when Dr. Martin Luther King called on Americans to come to Montgomery, and she had like 3 4 kids, and she told her husband, I'm going to Montgomery, and she was shot and killed by Ku Klux Klan's people. So there were a handful, and then there were many white women, the vast majority, who did absolutely nothing to support the civil rights movement whatsoever. And then there was another very large group of white women who actively resisted the civil rights movement, like did everything they could to prevent integration, to
Yeah.
get pro-Confederacy um, textbooks written, to
Mhm.
erect statues of Confederate um, generals and things in public spaces. A very organized movement of white women to prevent civil rights movement. It was called massive resistance.
Yeah.
And yet, who is the greatest beneficiary of affirmative action, of civil rights protections? Um, it's white women.
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah, I see, Laurent, I see your question in the chat. Why do Indian and Asian people cling to whiteness and are harmful to Black people, right? And I think that here's what I would say as somebody who's not a scholar of history, but certainly, has spent a lot of time studying decolonial scholars, which some of it is the model minority myth that was deliberately constructed in the 60s as a tool to undermine Black civil rights demands. By suggesting that racial minorities could succeed through hard work alone. And I hate to say that, like, I still see that. Like, I still see Asian folks leaning into those myths. Um, there's also been a lot of deliberate work done to drive a wedge between Asian Americans and Black Americans, which only serves white supremacy, right? Like, ultimately, at the end of the day, it doesn't serve us either, because in this moment where there is such tremendous ICE brutality taking place across American cities, one of the places where ICE is kidnapping people is the freaking Indian grocery store.
Mm.
And there are videos coming out of New Jersey and Chicago, and even a mile away from where I live here in Redmond, Washington. ICE is kidnapping a lot of times, like, seniors in Asian grocery stores. Yeah. And then there's the piece, that many Asian Americans who arrived, especially after 1965, came into these sort of professional pathways, the doctors, engineers, academics, lawyers, and their class position was pre-selected by immigration policy, right? And that also has served to create a wedge not only between Asian Americans and Black folks in the United States, but also Asian Americans that came after 1965 and the ones that came 100 years earlier,
Mm,
right? There were a lot of Asians that came to the United States, the Chinese who came and built the railroads, the Japanese who were farmers and were interned during the Second World War. There was South Asian labor, especially from the Indian subcontinent, that was here in the early 1900s, that were working alongside Latinos as farm workers, right? And those are not people that got US citizenship, naturalization. They did not get to benefit until 1965.
mm. Yes,
Yeah.
and 1965 was because of the civil rights movement.
Right,
This
and leadership of Black Americans specifically, right, which made it possible. It created this enabling environment. But here's what I will say is that while we owe Black folks like immense gratitude, um, we really owe, like, we owe it to ourselves to know this history. And it makes me really sad just how many people don't ground in this history, right? Like I'm not gonna speak for all Asians, but I think I can speak specifically for Indian Americans and people of the Indian diaspora. Like this history has not been taught to us. This history is not shared in our communities outside of some really like a small minority of left of center organizers. Like this history is, we find our way to this history in relationship often to Black folks, and that has to change.
Yeah. I feel so blessed to live in the Bay Area, which is a center of Black liberation, of multiracial organizing, of, the student strike at San Francisco State that led to the establishment of the first ethnic studies department. The I live in the neighborhood, Japantown, Fillmore, where, was originally a Jewish neighborhood, then became increasingly a Japanese neighborhood, then at the time of the Great Migration became increasingly a Black neighborhood, and then during internment, um, Black Americans were stewarding Japanese Americans' businesses and homes so that when they came back, they had something to come back to, not taking their homes and businesses as white Americans did. This is a very special neighborhood, and I feel so grateful to be able to learn about all of this stuff because we have Black radio stations, we have community events, we have people in the neighborhood who share these stories. But so few people get access to learning about these things, and that's why I think conversations like ours today is very, very important. I wanna highlight what Laurent says. Learn how Black American struggles and fights have helped non-white and non-Black people in this country. And then talk about how these communities practice anti-Blackness and how these communities can come together with Black people and reject whiteness. And again, when we say reject whiteness, we're not saying, I don't know. beat up on white people or, you know, avoid white people. We're saying whiteness as the construct. We're saying whiteness as the culture, whiteness as a way of being in the world. Um, yeah.
Yeah, and oh my gosh, there's so much work to be done in rejecting whiteness. I think especially among South Asians, Asians. There's somebody in the chat who said, I don't understand why Indian people refer to themselves as Asian. Um, I don't know about any other Indians, but when I immigrated at the age of 15 and I would call myself Indian, people thought I was Native American. And I think that there's a lot of leaning into language that is accessible or that's mainstream, um, even if it even if it's not reflective of how we identify, right? Like I think for what it's worth, when I am with other South Asians, like I identify as Desi. And Desi comes from the word Desh, which means country, right? Like so you're off the country. And lots of people from India, Pakistan, Bangladesh, even they identify as Desi, right? I don't even know that they necessarily identify as being called South Asian, but that's this is the friction of the way in which identities are cast in a place like the United States, where everybody gets to have a hyphenated identity except white folks. There's no white Americans, but there are Black Americans or Asian Americans and yeah, but I do also want to like touch on something with respect to anti-Blackness, right? Which is a lot of us are taught that even before we immigrate to the United States. And I think one of the colonial hangovers or the facets of having been a colonized people is that there just is a tremendous amount of colorism that's already in our communities that then gets exploited. Like I grew up in a family where between my sibling and myself, I'm definitely darker skinned, and yeah, and like my parents would say, "Oh, like here's my Black child." And I look back at that and like I'm just like there's a part of the adult me that's like that's so offensive. That's so offensive because what are you trying to say, right? But you look at matrimonial ads in like the Indian community, and it'll be like looking for a wife must be fair, right? There's a lot of value for fairness. There's a lot of, you know, across the Asian diaspora, like the skin whitening creams, right? Like, so some of this is ingrained and is such a deep part of like colorism, especially, is such a deep part of our culture. And there's already anti Black bias that we're coming to this country with. And the media machinery and the political machinery in this country is so good at then making that wedge even bigger. Making that wedge even bigger. I think the other thing that we don't talk about enough, especially in like social justice or DEI spaces, is classism. Like our communities are also extremely classist, right? If when two Indian people meet each other, the first thing that they're trying to suss out by asking questions like, what do your parents do? Like, what is your job is? What is your class positionality? What is your class positionality? And I grew up in a very working class family. My mom has done many different jobs over the years. My dad's a chef. My parents never had a lot of money, and they had even less of it after we moved to the States. And I noticed this dynamic through my teens and my 20s where every interaction with an Indian person made me so uncomfortable because they were trying to guess whether my family had money or not. And I knew that I don't come from wealth, right? And I would just feel such incredible shame. And so now look through a class lens, and then the relationship between Asian and Black communities becomes even more fraught, right? Because why is somebody experiencing poverty? well, you didn't work hard enough, you're not smart enough, you're not capable enough. And then we apply that lens to everybody that we're meeting.
Mm. Yes.
Right? Like, and you live in the Bay Area, so you've been, I'm sure, like privy to the governor of the state of California blocking like caste legislation, right? Like caste discrimination. He did not sign the bill that passed both the House and Senate in the state of California because, right, like caste discrimination is closely tied also to class-based discrimination. And what does that say? What is not signing this piece of legislation actually say, right? It says that like Indian people want to be able to discriminate against people from lower socioeconomic classes. they
And
they
not
reserve that
and
right,
not
right? And they reserve the right to discriminate within their own communities.
Mhm, mhm. Yes, and he also proudly threw trans people under the bus and, with his own hands tearing down homeless encampments and many other terrible things. I am no fan of Governor Gavin Newsom, and I pray he is not the Democratic presidential nominee in 2028. Um,
Yeah.
Nish says so many Black and immigrant communities rode the coattails of the Civil Rights Act and don't even know it. Yes. And to your point about how we get indoctrinated into anti Blackness, as a white American, I grew up in an almost entirely white small town in Colorado that had
Yeah.
been a sundown town, and that by the time I'm growing up there in the 70s, 80s was a hotbed of the John Birch Society. And
Mm,
so I remember this so clearly in my nearly all white elementary school, us having a Nancy Reagan Just Say No assembly that where cops came to the school and they showed us films that largely consisted of Black people overdosing on heroin. And they said, if you so much as smoke marijuana, this is how you will turn out. Don't be like them. They are scary. They are dangerous.
oof.
They are criminals. And I was just reflecting on it recently, like, why is that memory so clear? I don't have a lot of real memories from elementary school, but that one is so clear on my brain. And I realized it was because it was traumatic. Usually
Mhm.
when you're in elementary school, you're feeling good. You're learning how to read, you're getting a little red sticker on a little star on your homework assignment, you're memorizing your multiplication tables. Like I got a lot of positive reinforcement. And I think the reason why that stood out so much is that it was traumatic to see like, why are we watching this at school?
Mm.
But they were indoctrinating us in anti-Blackness. So when I grew older, I started to notice, well, why is there so much racial inequality? The story they told me at school and at home was we used to have terrible inequality, but then there was a civil rights movement led by Dr. King, who is wonderful. And now opportunities are distributed equally, and some families choose to work really hard. That's why they have what they have, and other families choose not to, and that's why they're in the situation that they're in. And had I not been so fortunate to live the life that I led, um, that would still be my understanding of racial inequality. I think that's what a lot of my white friends are telling their kids today, which is why so much of my work is around teaching parents how to talk with your kids about race.
Yeah. Oof. I've been thinking a lot about like, well, certainly I think it's my responsibility to have conversations with people from my own community about how they're showing up in this moment, what they're teaching their kids. And I do take as many opportunities as I can to both do that and also just to draw the highlights between the rise of fascism in the United States and sort of the parallels between how Modi has already been operating in a place like India for the last 10 years. And in 10 years of Modi being the prime minister of India, women of India have gotten poorer. There are fewer women in India that are represented in the workforce now than when he entered office, I think 10 or 12 years ago. And we're on a similar trajectory here in the United States, of course, and exacerbated with what AI is doing to really decimate white collar labor. But I have also been thinking about, and I actually don't have an answer to this, right? Is like, what is the responsibility of white parents in this moment? And I think this specific conversation is focused on how we show up for and in solidarity with Black folks, right? But like, what are white parents doing in this moment? How are they teaching their kids to understand and move through? Yeah, the politics of the moment, the disparities.
Yes, and to help your kid as well to develop a healthy, positive white identity. I don't want white kids to walk around feeling guilty and shameful of being white. That is not healthy. That is not positive, right? I want them to understand white supremacy and whiteness as a construct. And I want them to feel um like they are part of a multiracial society, that they have a role in the society. And as you said, solidarity is the answer. Bobby Seale talks about this all the time, that the solution to racism is not racism, it is solidarity. And how like the Panthers were organizing among black people, and there were the young lords with the Puerto Rican people, and there was the young patriots of the white people who were organizing together, and then they were all coming together. That is the model that we need to emulate. Let's see. Black people in this country have paved the way for so many immigrants, people of color. Minorities need to come together and stand up against white supremacy. Thank you for that comment. Throughout my career, white women were my biggest challenge. They were in awe of my boldness and confidence, but also afraid of it. Black women did not set the rules to a game we continue to lose. Thank you for sharing that, Lisa. And I talk about this too, from white men in the workplace. I've experienced sexual harassment, wage gap, and glass ceiling. But by far, the most psychologically damaging behavior I ever experienced at work came from white women who were higher than me in the organization, and I didn't report directly to them, but they perceived me as a threat to their proximity to the white men in power. And they would do everything they could to keep me smacked down so that I would not threaten them. And they would approach me like a friend and confidant, so I'd open up and share things with them, and then they take it and use it against me and besmirch my name. It was devastating. And I know that those same dynamics happen to many, many Black women in the workplace who um white women betray them terribly.
Yeah.
Also, I want to talk about the what I shared earlier about this narrative that some families have what we have because we work hard, and other families don't because they don't work hard, and how inaccurate, harmful, and racist that is. Yes, my family worked hard. Okay, I'm not going to deny that, and they received 160 acres of land through a Homestead Act land grant that they acquired for, $20. And that land is still in my family's possession. That land became the foundation to my mother's college education, my mother becoming a homeowner, my college education, my becoming a homeowner, and that land was the traditional territory of the Cheyenne, Arapaho, and Kiowa people that militias of white men came through and genocide, massacred, and pushed the survivors to far off reservations. And that Homestead Act was the greatest wealth transfer in American history. And it was deliberately withheld from Black people who were often stuck sharecropping on the same plantations where their forebears had been enslaved. And if they even tried to move or organize or do anything, would be subjected to tremendous violence at the hands of white people. So it is a lie to say we have what we have because we worked hard, or it's an incomplete truth. We have what we have because we worked hard and we benefited from these race-based policies that were deliberately withheld from Black people and made it very difficult for them to attain middle class benefits like home ownership and college education.
Yeah. Karen, I'm curious. So I'm also tracking the chat, and I know you are as well. We're tracking both the chat that's coming in from
Mhm.
YouTube as well as from LinkedIn. And I'm curious, like, do we want to take some questions? I feel like
Sure.
we have done some of the outlining of the challenges that right that we're experiencing, and I think that it's just worth saying that not having not having the education, not having the awareness is really landing us in a sticky spot in this moment because people from all different minority communities are feeling like they are uniquely under fire. And it's making it really hard for us to work together and be in solidarity. And so, yeah, I don't know. Like, should we? I think maybe we take some questions. Like, what are like what's
Yes.
coming up for
Yes.
people? What are people thinking?
Let's do it. 100% agree, multiple factors. South Asians brought over the caste system, colonial mindset, and illusion of safety from proximity to whiteness, colorism within our communities. Here's a question. Why do Indian people call themselves Asian? Oh, okay. I think do you already addressed that. Um, okay, let me see if I can pull up some questions. Tell the Jews to pay us what's owed for selling us
Oh,
into slavery and financing the ships that house the slaves in the belly of those ships. Yes, well, I don't think it was only Jews. The Christians were deeply involved in the transatlantic slave trade and um yeah. Okay. Sorry, I'm not doing a good job of there's so many comments. It's hard
there's
to
so many comments. Yeah, I think you might have to go. I think you might have to go read them at the end of this call. But there are also
Yes.
some people who've shared some really incredible
Mhm.
links. There's somebody who shared a link to equality labs, and they're doing incredible anti caste discrimination activism and scholarship and making the connection between the cultures that we've brought with us and how they manifest like here in the United States, right? Which they're the ones that have been leading the charge on getting these caste discrimination laws passed. Seattle has one on the books, right? They tried really hard to get California to pass it, which Newsom didn't sign. So if you are interested in the intersection of caste and class and race, Equality Labs in the Bay Area is an incredible organization.
Thank you for that reference. I'll try to
Yeah,
find the link. Lisa says it starts in the home, as my dad used to say. If you have friends who do not who if you don't have friends who do not look like you, that is problematic.
yeah,
I agree. You know, I've learned a lot, obviously, from reading books. But by far, way I've grown the most is in conversations like this one with my friends across difference. That is why, we convene events like this. And I apologize. You're right. I have not been looking through all the chat. Thank you so much for bringing
Yeah.
these comments. A topic worthy of discussion is how the Indian caste system reveals itself here in the U.S. as anti-Black racism. It carries over but is not addressed because they fall under the protections of being a fellow minority, but they discriminate wildly. It's
Yes.
interesting. I'll never forget one of my friends was the head of DEI at one of the big tech companies. And this was way back when in the 2014s, 15s, in conversation with her. And she's like, Karen, my biggest problem isn't even the white people, it's the Indians, and they were having a lot of just kind of patriarchal
Oh, yeah.
oppression
Yes.
of the other people who worked there.
Oh, yeah. I mean, my husband is Mexican, and I think over time, I just, and I think especially during the early days of the lockdown when we hadn't really figured out our work from home setups and you could hear what the other person was talking about sometimes too. I think there were all these moments where my husband and I were talked about how like the patriarchy and the anti-Black racism that's so endemic to our communities was showing up on these calls. Right? Like who was entirely excluded. Okay, we do have a lot of questions in the chat, so I'm going to help you out
Thank
here
you so much. I
as just, a younger generation that maybe can multitask in this way.
Thank you.
Yeah, yeah.
Um,
Um,
I don't understand why white folks are so scared. You all have this unlock. Even post-Obama, Black folks, we are never going to be in a position that privilege has afforded you. We will never catch up. We just ask that you give us a fair shot and stop moving the goalpost 100%. Lisa, what are white folks so scared of? Why are we to have Black neighbors or to send our kids to school with Black kids? Here in San Francisco, we have one of the highest rates of people sending their kids to private school of any country, of any city in the country. Let's all go to school together.
Yeah. Okay, there's a question here that says, what are some successful ways you've found to reach white women that can start this conversation without causing too much shutdown or defensiveness?
Well, number one, I used to be very harsh on white women, and very kind of for lack of a better term, like kind of superior. And that is just not a good way to go. I mean, first of all, that is white supremacy there, right? So I try to approach from a position of compassion, of self-compassion and compassion for them. And a big part of it for me has been really studying the history of white people and understanding why white women show up the way we show up is a manifestation of our intergenerational trauma, stretching all the way back to Europe, where for hundreds of years, white women who wanted any degree of autonomy or did not want to be subjected to patriarchal oppression or to religious oppression or any kind, you know, uh, basically rebels were declared to be witches, and they would parade them through the town naked. The whole town would come out and laugh at them and cheer as they were then burned at the stake with their kids in the front row to watch them burn. And the trauma that this has created for white women is, we believe that if we are proximate to the white men in positions of power and we do what they say and appease them, that we will be protected from violence. But if we try to defy, we will be subjected to tremendous violence. And once I started to understand that dynamic, then I understood more about the reasons why we show up today is our form of trauma response to fawn and to freeze with our oppressor.
Yeah. There's a book by a scholar named Kate Mann, and her last name is spelled Manne. And the book is called entitled How Male Privilege Hurts Women. And it is so incredible. Just her analysis around the role of patriarchy and then the relationship between white women and other minoritized groups, and this leaning down effect, right? Like white women tend to lean down on other minoritized groups because they are experiencing that from white men, and it's a way for them to have power and control where otherwise they wouldn't. And it's just like, I'm not here to have a pity party for the suffering of white women, but the book is offers such good analysis. um there's another question here from Anitra. Hi friend, it's been so long, I hope you're doing well. And she says, what is the answer to what is owed beyond this Black History Month? Is it reparations? Is it some other form of economic boost, or a future enshrining of policies so they cannot be diluted or dismantled?
Yes, I would agree to all of the.
All of the above.
We need public truth and reconciliation and repair process and public reparations. And in the interim between getting the public, we can do private reparation and we can do truth telling and conversations and tangible mutual aid. You know, one of the things that I talk about frequently is that white people's social networks are on average 90% white. And two-thirds of white people's social networks are 100% white. So what does that mean? White people's social capital, we are almost exclusively sharing our social capital with other white people. What does that mean? You know, not now as tech companies lay people off, but in the past, when tech companies were constantly hiring, they would offer a bonus to their employees who would bring in another employee. Well, if you're a white person working there and 90% of your social network is white, who most likely are you going to be bringing in as a referral to go work there? So this is why I'm like, we have to very intentionally figure out how can I redistribute my social capital so that it is fair and inclusive and more people get access to it than just exclusively white people.
Mm.
That is part of the solution. And I think talking with people in our communities, you know, me talking to white people, you talking to Indian people, um, you know what I mean? Like trying to bring awareness to as many people as possible and to bolster support for these things.
Yeah. Yeah. There's a story in the chat here from Helen about the treatment of a Black woman by, and it sounds like an Indian woman who was her boss. And oh, stories like that break my heart. They just really, really break my heart. And Helen, I'm so sorry that you had to be witness to that, and to your friend who experienced it. Yeah, I mean, Indian women need to do better. And I think we're also in this moment, right? Like, we have an Indian American woman who is married to the vice president, and many others who have chosen to side with who they think has power rather than being grounded in their own communities and also just grounded in solidarity. Right? Like that is not an Usha Vance. And I hate that she is on this national stage and, yeah, giving a lot of us a bad name, for the lack of a better word.
Yeah, well, and there are plenty of white women who are involved in positions of power throughout the administration as well. Well, I think having conversations like this one, pointing these things out, trying to work within political organizations to build more of a multiracial political organization and push for multiracial democracy. Like, I'm very, very adamant that the Democrats can only win if we are truly progressive, if we are
Mm.
truly multiracial, if we don't throw anyone under the bus. Like, we have to build a coalition that includes everybody and centers racial and gender justice, and don't try to run away from that and try to appeal to the moderates. No.
I don't disagree with that. Yeah. Yeah, we need a bigger tent, not a smaller one.
Yes, without the billionaires. As Gavin Newsom said, Gavin Newsom said the billionaires are in the tent. I'm like, no, the billionaires are not in the tent. They're trying to own the tent. Oh, okay. Well, any further comments that we want to pull? Oh, we have a book recommendation.
We
Um,
do have some book recommendations. I think multiple people have talked about Isabel Wilkerson's Cast, the book Cast, and I believe there is now also a movie.
agreed.
And yeah, that book was life changing, right? I think the way that she was able to draw the through line between caste from the Indian subcontinent, caste in America vis-a-vis white and black folks, and then caste in Nazi Germany as something that emerged very quickly. And then, I mean, I don't know that it came to an end, right? But the regime did. And so, yeah, it's just a phenomenal, I think that book is a phenomenal resource. And I think maybe we just end with this comment, from Lisa. She says, "We all need to be accountable and own our BS. Why are we seeing each other as competition?" And I like absolutely will double down on the fact that the person sitting in the desk next to yours is not your competition. They're your coalition. We are each other's best coalition against fascism, because quite frankly, fascism doesn't actually care what race or ethnicity you are. Um, it's going to get you, and we've already seen white on white deaths, like murders, killings. And so, yeah, um,
Yeah, the
we,
only thing that fascists hate as much as people of color are white people who empathize with people of color.
yeah, yeah. Thanks to everybody that joined today. We really appreciate you.
Yes, thank you so much, Aparna, for being open to this conversation. I really appreciate you. And yes, thank you. And I apologize to those that we were unable to get to the comments. It was kind of a lot. But it was great to see so much participation. And we will share the link then to register for the March 3rd. That will not be a live, it will be a Zoom conversation about a perfect neighbor and changing the dynamics between Black women and white women. That will be the subject of that conversation. And Lisa Robinson and I will be in conversation about that with Aparna moderating. So thank you so much, everybody. We appreciate you. Bye now.
Thank you.